So just before we get started, I'm going to say I actually was first tasked or appointed or asked to moderate the prior panel on outbound. And if you don't know me, Aaron Ross, predictable revenue. But I want to do this one. So I said, no, I don't want to do the outbound panel. I want to do this one on sales specialization because it's so important. But I've got two asks, or one thing to tell you. So if you haven't gotten it yet, Jason bought a bunch of these. He's the one who funded like 1,000 copies of the new book, but they didn't really tell. They put them in the very, very back, at the top floor, in a closet, hidden under the stairs. There's like a trapdoor and a secret code. But if you go up there, there's a bunch of books. You can go get one for free. And then we're doing a signing at the carb.io booth. It's our software company at 12:30. So free books. Make sure you get one. There's only 1,000 books, and there's way more than 1,000 people here. But they're hidden. They're up in. It looks like you got to pay for them, but you don't. That's one. And two is, my 30 seconds on outbound is actually I just did 3 short videos on how people get so fixated on these damn cadences. Should it be 4 email sequences and a LinkedIn? Like, oh my God, you're missing the entire freaking point. So I just did 3 short videos on predictable revenue, the blog, and people loved them. So go check those out. That'll be my 90 seconds or 30 seconds on outbound. So, scaling. You can't scale unless your sales roles are specialized. Probably not news, hopefully not news to people here. It's something, but a lot of this is also how to specialize the best way. Because there's a lot of questions that come up around, what if you have account management versus customer success? How many are the ratios? What if we do enterprise versus small business? So let's kick it off. I'm going to ask each of you just a bit about, let's start with Bridget. Can you just introduce yourself? Is there another fact, first one, to maybe like a fun fact about you personally? And then I'm going to ask you about the team you've run.
All right. I'm the VP of Corporate Sales at Sumo Logic. And starting with the fun fact, I'm one of 7, which seemed like a lot until I met Aaron. And my father was an entrepreneur, and I think my father really understood specialization very early on because he learned that among the 7 children, that on the weekends, they had to specialize the tasks, and they specialized indoor versus outdoor. The outdoor was the very early picking weeds. The younger kids did. This is a tip for Aaron, if any of you don't know.
I got to work on this. I'm taking notes right now.
And the indoor, this was the more specialized. I was really good at ironing. And I hated to do the gardening, which I likened to my closing reps that don't like to do prospecting. So we learned specialization very early on in my family.
Great. So actually, just tell us, before we get to Don here, how big is the team and what kinds of roles do you have today?
Yeah, so on the team, we've got a lead gen team, that's a lead enrichment team, actually, that we contract out from the Philippines that does all the lead enrichment on the list. There's a lot of talk about list building. So we have that just on lead enrichment. We've got a BDR team, a closing team.
The BDR is doing prospecting, 100%?
Outbound, all 100% outbound. We've got then the closing team and an account management team. And then within the closing team, we've got SMB mid-market in one segment, and we've got field and sort of enterprise in another segment. And then we've got sales engineers, which is another area of specialization, and then, of course, management.
Okay. And roughly how many people overall?
Sumo Logic has 300 and some odd people. On the sales team, there's about 8 in account management, roughly 15 in the field, 32 inside mid-market, and about 10 on the BDR team.
Okay. So we'll get into that, because what you'll find, too, is every team, you've always got places of sort of tension and friction. Or again, like customer success or account management, like who does what, or inside, outside. But we'll get to that. Don, what's maybe a fun fact, secret vice, or hobby, before telling us a bit about the team that you manage?
Well, I think people that know me, I think the little fun fact about me, I mean, I was an SDR for a long time. So I think one of the...
Hey, we've got that in common.
Well, you probably know this trick too. So every area code in the country, you name an area code, I could tell you where it is.
Oh, wow, okay.
Give an area, I could tell you what the area code is. And it's just from having dialed so many numbers and knowing an associated city and where those were, so having that.
Does it work the reverse, if like Topeka?
Topeka, I believe, is 316.
Oh, I have no idea.
I don't know if that's
true,
right
but
or
it's
not.
impressive. Let's pretend it is.
That's kind of my trick.
Okay, so size of sales team, rough like.
Size sales team.
Yeah.
So today I'm at Datahug. Today I have a similar to Bridget. I have a data enrichment person that I has that goes through and just finds names, builds out the lists according to the.
So, yeah, list building is like actually a separate role, and whether it's inside the company or not, whether it's like a separate function.
Yep.
So list building, list enhancement. Okay, what else?
Yep. And then we have an SDR team. I just extending offers, two offers today.
Okay.
So we'll have a team of
SDR,
6.
the prospectors.
Prospectors,
response.
managing the inbound as well.
Okay.
Because we're a little bit smaller than Sumo Logic, so I don't have a ton of people. So a lot of people do multiple things. And then we have a team of 3 AEs, specialized between SMB and kind of mid-market enterprise. And then we have a customer success team, which also functions as our account managers, so they're responsible for renewals and upsells as well.
Okay. So first, there's got to be somebody in here at some company that doesn't have specialized sales teams or specialized as far as they should go. Because I say generally more roles are better. Like the more roles you have, or the better. Like more people doing different things, but each person does fewer things better. But if in case someone's still like, hey, do we specialize? We've got salespeople that are prospecting and doing a lot of prospecting, more than 20% of their time, and closing. I don't know, like my CEO's not really bought in. Like, why specialize, or why take it to like an extreme?
So it's interesting I've been at Sumo Logic now about 8 months, and many of you are starting companies or in companies that are smaller and maybe early on, and Sumo Logic definitely had this issue early on, or not issue, but situation early on, where they weren't specialized. And you could have a small team of salespeople that actually could pretty effectively do a number of roles. So just before I came on, a few months before, the closing reps were also essentially prospecting. They were closing, and they were also handling what we would now consider account management. And when you're small, you can get away with it. And the sort of the prevailing thinking at the time was, hey, if it works for 4, it'll work for 40. And I'll tell you, what works for 4 does not work for 40. Because what happens is that the lead flow also needs to be distributed amongst a larger group. And so there is more of a need for outbound. So for us, as we've gotten bigger, it's definitely been imperative that we do more and more specialization along the way. My encouragement would be, even at the beginning, even if you don't specialize roles and have a big team, to have an eye towards specialization and know that that's what you're building towards. Another reason.
But actually, that's such an important point. This might be like the number one thing to take away with you today is, like, look back when you created a new role, from the time that you wanted to create it until you felt like, okay, this is basically, we figured it out. If you had to just guess, how many months?
At least 6.
Okay, so right, when you're growing and you're like, okay, we're going to do outbound or enterprise or something, it's going to take probably way longer than you think, from starting to, okay, we're doing it, to it's not working. It's at least 6 months probably for a lot of these roles.
And Aaron, you asked the question, kind of teeing this up around other people in the organization not understanding why to specialize. And I've definitely encountered that at Sumo Logic, where oftentimes the BDR or some of these roles are seen just as cost. Why should I add a BDR or an SDR role when I can hire a closer that I can associate revenue with? And so part of it also is an education process around the dividing up of the role and how that actually contributes to the overall quota attainment of a team.
Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
I think when I joined Datahug, one of the things I found too is like the BDR team that was there was doing a lot of the research themselves. So when you have a BDR team,
prospectors, right?
Right.
Yeah.
The prospectors, but then they kind of default to the easier thing. So like if you want to turn up the number of calls or you want to turn up the number of meetings, but they kind of default to doing the research, well, it's like, okay, I want to take the research off their plate so I can get them focused on the things that I want them to do, so that, as you're doing the specialization, okay, my BDRs are doing this, and it's going to create enough meetings for my AEs. And so having that specialization allows them to focus and know that, like, okay, this is my job, this is what I need to do, rather than maybe defaulting something that is easier or not as hard to do.
Yep. So actually, Don, so if you, again, maybe you took off the research, when you made that kind of split and defined new roles, did you feel like 6 months, what do you feel like is that sort of time frame before we're starting it, and how long is it going to take to get it nailed down?
So the BDRs that were there before I joined were probably there about 4 or 5 months. And I can tell you, it was a little bit of shock to their system too. So it's like when I joined, I said, wow, I think you guys should be doing at least a meeting a day. And they were doing maybe, a meeting a week. And they were like, there's no way we could do a meeting a day. And I'm like, yeah, there is. Let me help you get there. All this research you're doing, I'm going to take that off your plate now. Now you can focus on making calls. And now they're doing a meeting a day. So it's like, they were able to see that by offloading this piece that, was burdening them with a lot of time, they were then able to focus on doing the things they could do, which is going to make them money because they get money for the meetings that they book. So when I upped the quota, took off the responsibility of doing that data research, they were then able to focus on making those calls and then making themselves successful.
Yep. So we'll say it's for sure not painless to further specialize to add roles because it involves change, but it's better to bite the bullet. Sometimes it's easier to layer on a new role. Sometimes you got to restructure.
Yeah.
But what do you think has so far been, for example, you mentioned like the main way you changed roles that helped make an increase? Was it this let's call it outsourcing, like separating research from the prospectors, or is there another one that really helped make the lives of someone on the team much better, more productive? Or would be a second one? Yeah,
I think it's like creating the problems at the different levels. Like it's what kind of forces us to specialize. So it's like, having someone who's a researcher who's generating a lot of names to give to a BDR. A BDR then creates a lot of meetings. You have enough meetings for an AE, then you got to hire more AEs. You have enough AEs, you're closing enough business, then you got to hire new customer success folks. You have customer success folks, things are coming up on a year renewal, you got to hire AMs. So it's like trying to break things at each level to know, like, okay, now I got to do this, now I got to do this, as you're going through and creating enough strain on the system to create that role and have those folks be specialized.
Yep. So great points so far. First, which is start thinking about future, like the roles you'll need to create early, because it's going to take longer than you think. Just look for what people are doing in any of these roles. What's the low value tasks for them that someone else should handle?
Yeah.
So actually, Bridget, what's one of the changes you've made that you saw, that you're, I don't know if you say proud of, but you're like, okay, we did X, we changed these roles, and that really made a great difference, really helped?
So I think the biggest thing is introducing, we didn't have actually BDRs for the corporate team. So that's a brand new role that we're introducing and layering on.
Do you buy them predictable revenue when you hire a new BDR?
Oh, Aaron, we have predictable revenue.
It's all over
everywhere.
the office.
Yeah, it's all over the office. In fact, I was going to give a bit of a spoiler alert because I've already read From Impossible to Inevitable about another challenge that we've had is that, so we have a team of 30 to 40, depending on any given point in time in the quarter, of closing reps. And when I first went to introduce this notion of needing BDRs for the team, one of the thoughts that came from management was, why don't you just repurpose some of the existing closers and make them BDRs?
Ow. Yeah.
Thank you for understanding.
It does not work.
Ow. And ow on so many levels. Ow on taking somebody and saying, here you've sort of graduated to this role. Hey, we'll still pay you the same, but we want you to go do this other role for a period of time, which is not good for an individual's development. So that wasn't going to work. You have finance pushing back saying, why am I going to pay an SDR, a more experienced person to do something, an SDR role, and still pay them at that higher salary when I don't need to? There was a lot of friction all over the place. Needless to say, this would have been what our CEO also cares about is, what's going to come out on Glassdoor about Sumo Logic and how we're restructuring the team. So it's why I say it is really important to have an eye on specialization at the beginning. And what we needed to do is then just keep layering in as opposed to repurposing some of the people there. But it's amazing what ideas.
You're always evolving it.
Yeah, always evolving. I think the other thing is this isn't a set and forget type of situation. With particularly cloud computing, these new disruptive technologies and companies are being introduced all the time, which can help in terms of work and products and services for salespeople. But it also disrupts markets. Also, you never know what your competition's going to be doing. So you need to always be re-looking and rejiggering the ratios of BDRs to closers. When do you add account management, SEs? Those ratios are going to continue to change as things change within the company and the landscape. And
that's good. Actually, do you have some current ratios you use between different roles, Don? Let me start. I'm going to ask the.
Yeah. So today what we try to strive for is 2 SDRs to 1 AE. And then we kind of manage the customer success team around number of customers. Okay. So as we try to keep it.
Do you have a number in your head for number of customer success people per number of customers?
Yeah, I mean 40 to 50 is what we're trying to track to. It's what I've tracked to in the past.
Yeah, and by the way, that number will vary a lot based if you have enterprise, small business. So don't just write down, okay, 1 customer success person for 50 customers. No.
Yeah. Depends on your ACV.
There's
a lot of things.
There's that in the book. There's actually a case study on a company called Guild that goes through. They have 3 tiers. There's enterprise, mid-market, small business, and their ratios. About some ratios that you use, Bridget, for your.
Okay, so Don, let me just. You have 2 SDRs per account rep.
Yep.
Okay, so ours is really the opposite. We've got 1 SDR per 3 salespeople.
Okay.
Per 3 closers.
Well, average deal size, though?
Yeah, I was going to say deal size has got to be higher.
Okay, what is your deal size?
About
No, it doesn't necessarily have to be higher.
25K.
Okay, so our average, it starts low, but the average deal size for my team can go up to, 300K ARR. However, the reason I'd love to get to that's my goal, is to reverse it, to have more of the prospectors feeding the sales team, because I also believe, as per the last session, outbound is really important. Yeah. You can be very targeted.
Hallelujah!
I know, let's all stand
Inbound
up
is
and have a revival.
Peanut butter and chocolate, they taste great together.
They
so
do
none of
taste
this
great
like outbound
it's
bad,
not,
inbound great.
No, they both have to work well together. But what I'm also dealing with is I'm starting with a 1 to 3. So 1
prospector to closers.
Correct. I'm hoping to shift it, and this is where it's important to have metrics and data and have clean data, and to be monitoring that all along the way. And again, this isn't a set and forget. So one other thing that I would strongly recommend, particularly as you're setting up your sales team and your organization, is pay really close attention to data and hire a sales operations person.
Colin, are you listening?
Very early on.
Yeah.
Because you can't, all of these metrics, you've got to be monitoring over time. And here's, again, I'll use what's happened at Sumo Logic as a great example. Fantastic growth and success, and the company's doing well and growing quickly, and those are all great problems to have. But what got left behind was really paying attention to clean data, how we're tracking data, what are the important things to measure. Because the thinking was, we'll get to it later, we'll get to it later, we'll get to it later. Makes it super hard to unravel and then to determine what is the right ratio of prospectors to closers. Yeah. When is the right time for us to introduce an account management team, and how many accounts should they be managing?
Yep.
And again, it's going to change also. It's not going to stay the same. So then having good systems in place to continually monitor it is also important.
I think one of the great things for me, just personally, coming out of Yammer, I joined Yammer really early, and I was the first sales operations guy on the ground. And it was just like, I got there and it was like, okay, just please listen to me and let me help build this right so that we can make this a great company. And it was one of the, to David Sachs's credit, it was like, just listen to what Don says. And like, I went in there and I was like, okay, you guys just bought Salesforce. I didn't have a mess to clean up. It's like, this is the way we do data. This is how we're going to import stuff. This is what needs to be there. Here are the required fields. Having all that stuff laid out really early, having everyone on board really early, it's really, really critical.
Plus, I gotta say, I really like your color palette.
Thank you.
The orange.
I was told to wear bright colors because we were on a dark screen. So,
well,
I didn't listen to that.
yeah.
So, but in all seriousness, so here's something about data, because I called out Colin, and he'll laugh at this. Colin, CEO of Predictable Revenue, but also our software company called Carb.io. And like for a year, I tell him and the team, okay, yeah, there's this cadence, blah, 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 and like email, blah, 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 but it's really, all it is about, you can't have an outbound team that is successful and scales past 3 weeks unless it's all about data management. Because if you don't keep your data clean, and this is true about not just outbound, but the teams, if you don't keep it organized to some level, because you can't keep it perfect, if you don't keep it organized or clean to some point, you're gonna hit a wall. Yeah. You're not gonna, it'll be successful for 3 weeks or 3 months, but not 3 years. It's
and
that
the
data.
wall, Aaron, that is a painful crash landing when you hit that wall. This is not like a bump. This is a...
Yeah, this is like when you bring in that sales ops person and they're like, oh, I got to clean this mess up.
Yeah, and it's going to take at least 4 months, if not longer, because now there's so much of these great apps about more calling, more emailing, more social, but generally what that means, whether it's for prospectors or salespeople, is the more activity they're doing, the faster the database gets screwed up. Yeah. So it's tough. Anyway, we're taking a different approach to it. But I'm glad you brought that up, because it's really another major key alert.
Yeah.
Cloth talk.
Another point I want to go talking about doing ratios. One of the things I try to stay away from is doing one-to-one. Because when you have a one-to-one ratio between a prospector and a closer, you may have bad habits that develop between those people that are.
They become too close.
Maybe a closer will treat their prospector like their secretary.
Have you ever had a prospecting team that was pooled, where they weren't assigned to specific closers?
Yeah, it's typically how I try to do it.
Yeah. Pool them?
Well, I mean, yeah. There'll be a group of there'll be a group of the prospectors that'll just, they'll have whatever opportunity they happen to get for a meeting. It just goes off to whatever the correct closer is. It's not like a one-to-one ratio.
Okay. So yeah, I'm a very evangelical believer that a prospect, any kind of SDR, MRR let's say prospector has to be assigned to specific, some number from like half to maybe 4 or 5 specific closers, because that relationship. So it's true in specialization. It's really about the relationships. So when a prospector and a closer work well together, when an account manager works well with an AE, because that can help trump all, if the data is bad, if the process is bad, if there's miscommunication. So it's not to get lost in the shuffle, but the relationships between the teams are so important, any role to role, because that really can tie it all together.
And I think, Aaron, that's really important also for our customers. And one thing that you talk about in the book is this handoff. And is this handoff...
New book or old book?
They all blend together. It's
I
in the
think
new
both
book,
of us have that.
It's in the new book.
No. Here's the question: doesn't having people get passed off from one to another make service worse? Right? That's what you're.
And I'm saying no. It doesn't. It shouldn't make service worse, but the service can be disrupted if there isn't a good relationship between the people behind the scenes. Yeah. So I don't think it needs to make it worse. I think in most cases it should make it better. But if it's disrupted behind the scenes, trust me, it'll get disrupted for the customer also. So it's really important to have, I agree with you, good, tight relationships behind the scenes, because that'll only help the customer experience.
Yeah. So I will tell you, if you've ever either been in this place or had someone complain that, the customers hate being passed off from the prospector to the closer to account management, because you're not doing it right. That's the problem. Either it's the relationship or the process, or there's something there. It's not the specialization, it's how you do it that is the problem. Because we've seen it done well many, many times.
Right.
So there's one tricky area I want to dig into here. And that is this area of, someone signs up. They become a customer. let's call it account management, which to me implies there's like a quota carrying. There's someone who has a sales quota selling to current customers versus customer success. The two ideas, how often, when do you combine them into one person? When do you have to separate them so there's not, you reduce the inherent conflict between, I want you to be successful, but I also need to make money.
Yeah.
How do you balance those? What works and what doesn't? Maybe Don.
Yeah, I mean, the way that I've seen it done, where it worked really well, is making sure that the customer success person is tied to KPIs, paid on KPIs that have nothing to do with how much the customer is bringing in as revenue. Normally those things will get tied to how well are they engaged, how many users do they have, maybe meeting goals or different things that aren't revenue related.
Yeah, it's hard to do that, but there's no perfect way. But you got to do something.
You got to find something. And then the account manager, of course, is going to be the person that's tied to making sure the renewal happens, making sure there's some level of upsell within the account, and then of course the customer success and the account manager person have to work together so that so that the account manager can be successful with that renewal.
Yep.
Now, when you're small, I mean, it's hard to break that off.
But you got to start early. You got to start early when you're small, earlier than you think.
Yeah, start earlier than you think. But I mean, if you're really small, it's going to be the same person. But I mean, that's going to be one of the first places you want to look to specialize, is to break those two people off.
Yeah, no, I mean, Jason says, and I believe Jason, is that most companies, by the time they've got 10 or 15, most tech companies, 10 or 15 people, one of them is generally like a dedicated someone to customer success, whether they're an executive, but there's someone who's like focused on that full time, earlier than you think.
Yeah.
Bridget, you want to add anything?
Well,
if you've seen it fail.
We have an added layer of complexity. Here's the other, if this isn't already evident, newsflash here. The distance between the idea of specialization and execution can be quite long and bumpy.
Yeah. Yes.
It's not that easy. It may sound easy. Let's just specialize. It's not that easy. So for us, the closing reps, we have, our product really lends itself to a land and expand. So oftentimes the initial deal is small, but then it grows over time. So the first question you have to answer is, when do I make the handoff to account management or customer success? Do I do it right at the point of close? For us right now, we settled on 6 months, and we're looking at the data there because there's still a lot that they can do to realize more of the potential of that particular account. From there, it goes to an account manager that is very proactive, that looks at their usage, that looks at how are they doing based on a similar, let's say, cohort. Are they having any issues? They're very proactive. Where customer success for us is much more reactive. And they work really closely together. In fact, all three groups have to work closely together. But as soon as the selling motion starts to tip from less selling and more maintenance, that's when we want it to go to account management. And so we're looking at that data again right now to see when does the selling motion tip to be more account management versus more selling or upselling. So it may go to 9 months, it may go to 3 months. Again, it's back to data.
Yep.
Yeah, similar situation. I've seen it where because when you have a land and expand situation, you have a closer who just wants to get the foot in the door, but then they have to have some level of time to be able to do that upgrade and get compensated for that upgrade. And you got to have that clock so that they know, okay, I got to do this within this certain time frame, or else I'm not going to get compensated, and it's going to get handed off to my customer success person or the account manager, and they're the person that's going to get the upgrade. So you got to figure out, what is that for you at 6 months. I've seen it, we've done it 90 days because we want to keep our closers focused on closing. But again, like smaller ACV, it's it's a little bit more transactional. But you got to have that point in time, and it's got to be in comp plans, and everyone's got to know, like, this is the date that it happens, and it has to be exceptions that occur, and everyone knows what the rule is.
So actually, here's a trick, and I like that. That I think everyone struggles with that AE to AM account, closer to account manager handoff. At what point does the AE or closers introduce either the idea or the person of the account manager, because it's not going to be like, let's say there's a 6-month handoff. That's not when they do it. They should do it earlier. Is it like 30 days earlier? Is it actually when they buy? Like, how early do you start introducing that there's going to be a handoff? Here's the process. Here's the person.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Don.
Yeah. So for us, typically it's as you know that there's a contract out to be signed. We'll get the customer success person involved. Normally, our customer success person's typically involved in the trial. So the person's already introduced into the account. People know who that person is.
Earlier is better. Yep.
Earlier the better. And then once it's transitioned off of the closer, it's the customer success person that's managing the account. So then as they identify, okay, hey, there's going to be an upgrade potential, then or it's getting closer to renewal, like within a 90-day of a renewal, that's when we make sure that the account manager is introduced into the account.
Yeah, I would agree. In an ideal world in which we don't live, the earlier the better, like right away. You want them introduced, at least the concept that this account is going to move to an account manager that's going to be able to be proactively and take better care of them. To your point, that they'll get better care with specialization and handing off than if they'd stay with the salesperson. The reality of it for us is a little bit different. There is this tension of a salesperson trying to optimize the amount of, let's say, upgrade or revenue potential that they could get from this account within the first 6 months. It's important to me that nobody on the team is doing, unnatural acts to try to pull in additional revenue. That's not good for the customer.
Yep.
So having just a sort of a healthy balance between trying to optimize around the revenue, but always bearing in mind, the customer has to be first and has to be what fits their buying schedule as opposed to what we need to do because the account's going to cross the line and go to an account manager.
Yep. No, it's true. And ultimately, you have to keep that principle in mind, which is, customer success is not just the role. It's the teams together, working together. Even if the rule, sometimes you have to break the rule. It just doesn't make sense. Let's make the customer successful for X, Y, Z reason.
And that goes back to your point, Aaron, about just having good relationships between
where there's
individuals
trust
and the team, and where there needs to be a lot of trust. And that's really in any SaaS business. It's so important that all the different functions, product and engineering and marketing and customer success and account management and sales and finance, all of it has to work so seamlessly together. Having one single agenda, which is the customer, and at all touch points that everybody's thinking about really how to optimize that experience. If we optimize to that experience, everyone is going to do better. But it's in reality, again, it's hard. People do have their own different things that they're optimizing towards. And so to get everybody rowing in the same direction takes continual sort of diligence and effort.
Yep. All right, I'm going to ask. So I'm going to open this up for questions pretty soon. So if you have one, but I'm going to ask one last question here, is in terms of executives, there's sales, there's sales development, there's customer success. What's the basic leadership structure for the teams that are touching customers? In the either sales cycle or prospecting cycle, sales cycle after. Is it all to you? Is there a couple other? How's that work?
So for us, customer success reports directly into the CEO, which is great. I think that's where it belongs. I think sales operations, my opinion, right now it reports into the SVP of sales, but I also believe that should report into the CEO. It's very cross-functional. The SDR team reports into me. What else did you ask? And the account executives report up into me.
Yeah, okay. So there's a customer success team and executive who's a peer to yours, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, the SDR team reports into sales ops. They report into me. AE team reports into our VP of sales. Customer success reports into the CEO today.
Okay.
Or small, and again, as you grow, that kind of splits out into more of a.
It's all relative because to a two-person business here, you're huge.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. So let's see. Any questions so far? All right. We got some hands. Who has the mic? Actually, we got a bunch of questions. So maybe we'll use the rest of the time for questions.
I don't know if you guys have this, but can you talk a bit about the boundary between...
Sorry, where are you? Okay, why don't you
Yeah.
stand up for a second?
Can you talk about the boundary between an SMB team and an enterprise or mid-market team, and how you draw the line, and then
How you
the
segment
relationship...
those?
Yeah.
Right. How do you figure out where the segment is, and what kind of relationship is there between the two teams?
Today, the way that we do it is we look at the number of people that are on LinkedIn, right? Because I mean, again, this goes to data sources and data cleanliness. You have to figure out what your one true source is, right? Otherwise, you'll have someone going, "Oh, Mattermark says this, and LinkedIn says this," but then I look at this press release, they say this. So you always have to figure out what's your one true, source of truth.
'Cause even if it's wrong, it's better to have like one
Exactly.
source.
Yeah, even if it's wrong. Yeah, but usually, like looking at the number of people on LinkedIn, if someone says they're working at the company, that's usually a good judge of knowing like how large the company is going to be, and that's kind of what we rely on. And then you just figure out what what the demarcation point is between SMB and enterprise, and
What is it for you guys? Or
we do 0 to 200 is SMB.
Employees.
200 yeah, employees. 200 to 1,000 is mid market, and then over 1,000 is enterprise for us.
Yep.
I could almost just say ditto, 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 ditto. We also use LinkedIn as our source of truth, and I agree. It actually doesn't matter. Just pick one and then stick with that one.
It's the consistency.
Oh, and the important thing about LinkedIn too isn't what they say the company range is, but the actual number of those people that are like
That have profiles.
Yes.
The only issue that we're running into with that is that around lead routing, it's hard to do automatic lead routing because
Yeah.
LinkedIn doesn't have an API that tells you what that number is.
Exactly.
But we now have SMB and mid-market right now is together, and that's less than 1,000 employees as measured by LinkedIn, and then 1,000 and above is field. But again, it's gonna vary by company and industry, and really the sales motion. When do the sales motions look different? And for Sumo Logic, you may have the same at Datahug. We can have very big deals because all of our pricing is just around the amount of data that you're ingesting. You can have a small company that can have a huge deal. You can have a very large company that does they're not as likely to, but has smaller deals. So you just have to look at the complexity of the solution, the complexity of navigating your way through the sales process. Those are two factors to determine where the line.
Yeah. So basically, in other words, like most of the answers, you have to use your damn brain to fit it to your business.
Damn.
Yeah,
I know.
Sucks,
You can't just
doesn't it?
read it in a book.
Well,
Which is
and-
unfortunate.
The other important thing is
Well,
too,
only this book.
Well, that one.
The other
There are
important thing
some
is too is like
exceptions.
once you stick with a team, if someone happens to find that it changes, you can't change the team. I think that's another good point. Like you don't want to shift teams just because LinkedIn now says this, so now you're going to get a new sales rep. Like if you're with a team, if a team is working with a customer, you want to stick with that team regardless of what ends up happening. If they end up having explosive growth and they cross over some point where they're now enterprise instead of SMB, you want to stick with the team that they started with.
And just so you know, even that point is highly debatable. So, like companies will do it a different way. You just have to decide how to do it. Do you decide that? Do you make the decision that no matter how big or small the company gets, it stays with that particular segment or person who's selling? Or is there some rule that when it crosses a threshold for X amount of time, either higher and lower, that you make a change? I think there's not a right or wrong.
Yeah.
You just have to have some way. Otherwise, you're going to get all kinds of territory disputes.
That's like a...
have
really
the rule.
distracting.
Have the rule and make sure everyone knows what the rule is.
That's really important. So I hope you heard that is like, you pick your rule, and it's never going to be perfect, but you have to stick to it. It's the consistency which is super important. Not like it doesn't matter if it's 200 employees to 250 or again whether if companies grow they change. It's like pick something and stick to it.
Yeah.
And then of course you'll change it. When you change it, you change the whole thing. Everyone knows because you're always changing it. So it's sort of it's a paradox. You pick one thing and don't change it, but then you change it like all the time. So, unfortunately.
Exactly. That's
See?
exactly what you do.
There's your answer.
That's why I'm saying this isn't.
It's easy.
This is messy.
All right, another question. Okay, we got a bunch of hands. Who's got the mic?
Hi.
We got, okay.
Oh,
Hiya.
A bit slow here. This guy first. 1, 2.
What do you have to say about micromanaging cold calling scripts down to the word, and even though like demo scripts?
Good Lord.
I hate that.
Okay, so first of all, in the outbound session, I don't know what they talked about around that, but I will say scripts are very handy in training.
Yes.
In training. As soon as someone's trained, they should go away, basically. They might have cheat sheets, but... So be as micromanaging, as anal as you want in the training. Once that's done, let them do their thing.
Trust that you hire the right people to do the right things.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to come off as scripted on a call. I mean, that's the worst.
It's a kiss of death. So, okay.
I think the way also just to think about it is think about how you respond to a scripted message, whether it's a phone call or an email. But I agree that to learn it is super important.
Yeah.
Hello, you have won a free trip to the Bahamas. Okay, question, next one.
Yeah, I had a quick question. So my team originally, take SDR and then to sales rep, and my original ratio for my sales reps was they were booking 50% of their meetings. Drove that down to 25, now drove it down to 20, have it probably at 15% next quarter. Do you recommend taking that all the way to 0? Are you saying that a sales rep doesn't need to prospect at all? It's just
No, okay. So let me answer this because the sales reps shouldn't. Okay, what he's basically saying is sales reps used to do half of their own meetings, and by having prospectors, they've been able to reduce the amount of meetings that the sales rep has to do for themselves from 50% to like 15%. Should it go to 0? No, it shouldn't go to 0. I mean, really, it's more important. The dedicated prospectors should do all like the high volume prospecting. The sales people or people who sell should do their own prospecting, but just to a much smaller list of target like key accounts. Like 1 or 5 or maybe 10 or 20. It could be strategic partners that are going to generate recurring relationships. It could be big accounts, but like a small number of important ones. So, all right, question back here or
right here?
We got someone back here.
I think there's one here.
Yeah, can you comment how this would all work in an organization that is larger remote?
That's larger.
That's largely remote.
Largely remote. You guys have any?
Haven't really ran into that. I mean, we try. I mean, one of the things I think that I've always tried to do is like it's good having everybody at least on the
It's the same
side.
principles.
Having people all in the same room and being able to feed off each other's energy and hear how what's working, what's not in the same room is always a good thing. I'm not really run into it as much for a remote team.
It's just more communication.
I wouldn't do anything differently if everyone is distributed remote in terms of specialization than I would if everybody's together. I still think it's just as important.
Yeah, specialization is still the
I think
same.
the communication is what is that's where you're going to get challenged. You have to really spend more time on that piece.
Because again, the relationship building between teams, between people is really, 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 really. This is what my 3-year-old would say because she'll be like, really, 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 really. And she'll just keep saying it. Really important. Really important.
Hey, Aaron.
Who's got the mic?
I just jumped in back here.
Colin. All right, here's the carb.io guy, my partner.
We deal a lot with like remote prospectors, and all of our entire account executive team is remote. We'll actually have our guys when they're new to the company.
Can you hold the mic a little closer?
Yeah, we'll have them jump on demos. We'll have them like on weekly calls and on check-in calls, on the customer success calls, all the way sort of through the pipeline, just so they get to know the account executive, they get to know the customers. And you guys are right. The more that you can actually get them to, maybe not face-to-face, but on FaceTime, on Hangouts, on whatever it is, just to kind of build that relationship so that they're not just an email address that pops up in your Gmail. When you see those, it really helps build that relationship.
Yep, make them real people behind the email and phone.
Great. So I've been waiting just a second.
Okay.
So firstly, thank you guys. Great discussion. Really appreciate all the knowledge. For some context, 6 months ago, my company, we were all inbound, AEs fielding everything. We started piloting outbound late Q3, saw some success there, and are scaling that currently. We're now at a stage where we're ready to further specialize and do inbound SDRs. So curious to hear your experiences with inbound SDRs. What attributes do you look for among inbound SDRs as opposed to outbound, and any best practices for taking that kind of leap of faith and we don't want to squander those opportunities with more junior level employees.
Yeah, I mean it's a great place to hire entry level folks. Like I think
best.
Having an inbound SDR usually. I mean, I know you say squander opportunities, but normally those inbound leads are usually the best ones to put people on in case it does get squandered. I mean, it's not that's where you want them to really cut their teeth to to understand, what do people say when they, when they're coming inbound. When I talk to them, they can hear the keywords.
All those white paper leads that they mentioned.
All those white paper leads, yeah. It's a good place. If you can have the ability to have specialization down to that point, it's a great place to have those entry-level people to be able to, if you have enough specialization, you can then move them into an outbound role, have an outbound role move into an AE role, so that you have some sort of a nice career path for someone to be in.
Do you guys have a sense for how many leads a month that they have to sort of review or touch? Can one now inbound SDR or MR, market response rep handle? I used to say 400.
I've been at both ends of the spectrum. So I came from Yammer, where it's like every sign-up was essentially an inbound lead. And so we had all these inbound leads, it's like hundreds, thousands of inbound leads, to a situation where we don't necessarily have a freemium product, so we get maybe 5. So I've been at both ends of the spectrum.
In terms of what, if you're thinking if we have 2,000 inbound leads a month that need to be checked by a human, how many people do we hire to handle those?
I think that's also a hard one to answer, Aaron, because it depends on how easy it is or difficult to qualify or disqualify and disposition them. Some things, it's depending on the market or the segment you're in, it may be very easy to determine whether, this looks like a good lead or not and who it should go to. And if that's the case, they can go through a higher number more quickly. But I know for us, there's a lot of research that someone needs to do to determine, is this actually a good lead for what we're doing and size? Yep. And so they can go through a much smaller number. So I don't have a good answer.
I'm going to stick to my original and one benchmark of one dedicated, inbound SDR or market response reps could touch, handle 400 leads a month. Again, that a human needs to touch. That doesn't mean they're...
That's 20 a day.
Yeah, 20 a day. Well, it's like deleting Santa Clauses. And now that can vary. If you get 2,000 leads and they're all webinars, you may need one person. If you get 2,000 leads and they're all contact me's, you might need 10.
Right.
But 1 to 400 for inbound is still...
It's not a bad number.
Yeah, I'll say that's it, because why not?
Until
it's
you
worked.
change.
Yeah.
And
that's the role I started in Salesforce, so I have some experience with that. 20 a day. Yep. They pile up. Doesn't sound like a lot, but they pile up.
Yeah.
All right, another question. There we go.
Hi. So you were mentioning, Don, that when you started out and you got your Salesforce set up, blank slate, if you guys were going back and deciding to track data that you wanted to track that you find the most relevant, and especially things that you would recommend people to be tracking early, what are some items that maybe aren't the most obvious, like obviously revenue opportunities, all that everybody's going to be tracking?
Yep.
What are some non-obvious things that you definitely recommend setting up in early Salesforce?
If you have the ability to do it, if you can have some way to tie in your usage data back to Salesforce, either
product usage that.
Yeah, for your, because a lot of times what happens is you have all this back-end data from your own product that doesn't associate itself with Salesforce. But that's really good data if you can marry it. And so if you have a way to either use an API to sync it into Salesforce or create a data warehouse, so that you can then say, oh, hey, for all of our users, I now know all of this demographic information. Or
people still use the term data warehouse? Are you doing yourself? I lost track, but yeah. That's a good question and good answer.
Yeah, if you could do that early on, it ends up being such valuable information for your product team, for your, you have a lot more, because Yammer is the example I'm thinking of, right? So when people signed up for Yammer, they would use an email, and that's all we would have. Right? So then my team was responsible for going, okay, if someone came up from this domain, tell me information about this domain. So we would, we got inside view, and we said, okay, I know I have this domain, and then now I know, okay, revenue, I have location, I have number of employees, I know what industry they're in, but none of that existed on our backend system. All we had were these emails. And so what we did is created this data warehouse to say, okay, now for all of these people that I know that are users, that are our most frequent users of our product, they're in this city, so why don't we have a roadshow here? You're able to start doing that kind of analysis.
Did you get many AOL emails?
Well, no, not for Yammer, because you had to have a corporate email to sign up for Yammer.
All right, how about?
And I totally +1 that. I would say usage data.
Yeah.
That's probably the most significant that you can incorporate to give an idea of. What a sales rep should do with regards to a prospect or a customer or whatever. So.
And then you can also start measuring your CSMs that way too.
Yep. So we have time for a couple more questions. We're going to end a couple minutes early, partly because I have a book. I'm doing a book signing at the Carburetor, the Carb.io, predictable revenue booth at 12:30. So either we've got books, or if you get your free one upstairs in the swag shop, it's way at the top in the back, like hidden under like blankets. Yeah, it's like so 12:30. But last couple questions, and how about this gentleman here? This one. Okay, you first.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. So I know the topic of scripting a sales process is obviously controversial. So I was interested to hear that the three of you agree post-training to not script it. So I'm curious, how do you recommend evaluating what is and isn't working if you're not scripting it after training?
You look at the funnel metrics, plus you just do one-on-one coaching typically. I mean, it's the funnel, like metrics are useful, but they can also lie. So if someone's like,
but if you don't know what they're saying on the call, how do you know what to recommend as best practice?
First, it's you find out, is someone struggling? And then you would listen to the call. Like, if they're doing well, great. If they're doing super well, you would listen too. Like, what are they doing so well? So,
yeah, a lot of what we do, I know Kyle was on before, but we do use SalesLoft. One of the wonderful things about that is it has a click to dial where it records the call. So every call is attached to the Salesforce record. So it's really easy for us to go back and go, wow, you had a great call. Or if someone is struggling, be able to go through their calls and help them do some coaching around like, hey, maybe you want to try this, try that. Because it falls back to metrics. Like, are they booking the meetings that we say they're supposed to be booking?
and are the meetings turning into real deals versus just being,
Are the meetings with the right people? Are they quality meetings?
Yep.
So when the metrics are down, you kind of steer them back to what you see as the best practice.
Yeah.
So, and that's why it's so important, because it's sort of like clean data and consistent rules can lead to useful metrics. If you have irregular data and you have like people doing different things, the metrics are worthless.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Awesome. I guess we talked about deciding when to introduce and adjust specialization. Would you look at any particular revenue, cost, or growth metrics in order to make or adjust that decision? There's the decision to introduce specialization. Ideologically, you have to overcome management's concerns and challenges about, hey, we're going to introduce what used to cost us just the closer to bring the deal in. Now it's going to cost us the cold closer, the BDR, the list builder, all these extra costs, at least initially.
Extra investments.
Extra investments. So how do you, what metrics, if any, would you look at or other factors to make and adjust that decision?
It's employee happiness is one of them, right? Because I think one of the important pieces of specialization we haven't really talked about is being able to give somebody something different to do. Because doing these, especially like the prospector's job, the SDR job, it's hard, and people can get stale, they get burned out really quick. But if you have specialization, you can move them into something different, at a relatively, that's maybe they start as a prospector and then they start inbound, and then they do outbound, and they shift from outbound, and then maybe they
farm
do
team.
target accounts, and then they do target accounts, and they can start closing SMB deals, and then so as long as they have something different to do at each stage, they're going to be happier employees. They're going to stay with you longer. You'll retain them. I mean, it's hard to quantify.
Yeah. Well, first you have to do it. The way you do it could be a bit different. Like you can start small, get some data if you feel like you need. But you have to do it. It's not an option.
I agree.
The only time you don't have to do it the same way is if you sell like one call consumer, one phone call and you close it and you're done.
Yeah, if it's transactional.
Very transactional. Yeah. So we're gonna wrap up. I'm gonna be here. I'll say hi to you, but hey, thanks very much.
Aaron, Don, Bridget, thank you very much. Thank you very much.